Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to GP Blog. 2020 has been the most unbelievable season on record. From January all the way through until December. Each month threw up something different. Here's GP Blog's 2020 year in review. January was quiet to say the least. The drivers were on their holidays after the end of a gruelling season. Lewis Hamilton went skiing whilst Max Verstappen was keeping fit in Monaco, having signed a new deal with Red Bull. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas threw himself back into racing and competed in the Arctic Lapland Rally. February kicked off with car launches as the teams unveiled their 2020 challengers. AlphaTauri took car launches to a new level as they launched their vehicle with an entire fashion show. Racing returned in the form of pre-season testing, and it was clear from the get-go it was going to be a long season for Ferrari. Last season's second place team were all of a sudden lacking the pace that had previously kept them in races. Mercedes were up to their old tricks as they tested their DAS system, which caused quite the stir in the paddock. And concerns started to grow over something called the coronavirus as the Chinese Grand Prix was cancelled, but more on that later. It's March, we're in Australia. Racing is back, right? But as sport around the world was halted because of the coronavirus, it was only a matter of time before F1 was too. However, it took until just hours before FP1 of the Australian Grand Prix for F1 to take action. McLaren had already withdrawn after a team member tested positive. The Bahrain Grand Prix followed, as did the first ever Vietnamese Grand Prix. By the end of March, every race up until the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was either cancelled or postponed indefinitely, including the Dutch Grand Prix and the Monaco Grand Prix, meaning it was the first time since 1954 that the race in the Principality hadn't been held. With the world in lockdown, Formula 1 were working behind the scenes to create a new calendar for when the season restarted, but it was clear we could be waiting a while. Canada and France were both scrapped, but there was some light at the end of the tunnel as Silverstone and Hungary confirmed their intentions to go ahead behind closed doors. Chase Carey unveiled F1's plans to return in July, with between 15 and 18 races planned for the new season. In May, we started to see plans for 2020 unfolding, but we also saw the start of the 2021 season coming together. Sebastian Vettel confirmed he would be leaving Ferrari at the end of the season, as the Scuderia opted for McLaren's Carlos Sainz to replace him. That freed up a seat alongside Lando Norris, and McLaren went for Daniel Ricciardo, leaving one spare seat for a familiar face. The Dutch Grand Prix was officially scrapped as they decided to wait for fans to return. June saw races in Azerbaijan, Singapore and Japan officially cancelled, but we finally had the start of the calendar in place, as it was confirmed Austria would host a doubleheader starting on the 5th of July. Silverstone would host a British Grand Prix and the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, with further races in Hungary, Spain, Belgium and Italy all confirmed. Rumours of more races in locations and tracks that weren't originally planned swirled, and despite the delay, 2020 was shaping up to be a fascinating season. 5th of July 2020, Formula 1 returned. The Austrian Grand Prix wasn't planned to be the season opener, but it filled the void brilliantly. A dramatic race saw Valtteri Bottas claim the win, as only 11 drivers finished. Lewis Hamilton returned to the top step a week later, having won the Styrian Grand Prix, and he backed it up with victory at the Hungaroring. The Russian Grand Prix was next to be added to the calendar, shortly followed by the first ever Tuscan Grand Prix to be held at Mugello. The Nürburgring was set to make its return with the Eiffel Grand Prix, and Portimao in Portugal was confirmed to host its first ever race. Imola was also added to the calendar in what would be a shortened race weekend with just one practice session. And remember that seat at Renault we told you about earlier? Well, welcome back Fernando Alonso, who signed for Alpine, previously Renault, for 2021, filling the seat alongside Esteban Ocon. The Silverstone doubleheader welcomed in August as last lap drama saw Lewis Hamilton survive a tyre blowout, taking yet another win. But the big news was over at Racing Point, as Sergio Perez was the first driver to test positive for coronavirus. He was replaced by Nico Hülkenberg for 2 races in Britain, but the German didn't even start the first due to a mechanical issue. Max Verstappen halted Mercedes' winning run as he won the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. August concluded with another 2 Hamilton wins in Spain and Belgium. Istanbul Park was added to the calendar for October, along with a Bahrain doubleheader, including one race on the unique outer loop, which would provide one of the races of the season. August also saw the sale of the Williams F1 team as Dorilton Capital took ownership, ending 43 years of success in the hands of Sir Frank Williams. 12 months on from the end of his Red Bull nightmare, Pierre Gasly enjoyed the finest day of his career so far as he won the Italian Grand Prix with Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll joining him on the podium. It was the first time since 2012 that Ferrari, Red Bull or Mercedes hadn't made the top three. The Frenchman benefited from a red flag, a penalty for Lewis Hamilton to take his first ever race win. Normal service resumed a week later at Mugello, as a Hamilton masterclass saw him take the Tuscan Grand Prix, and Valtteri Bottas picked up his second win of the season at the Russian Grand Prix. For a while it looked as if Sebastian Vettel might not be in F1 next year, but in September it was confirmed he'd be racing for Aston Martin in 2021, replacing Sergio Perez. One of October's highlights was Daniel Ricciardo's third place finish at the Nürburgring. The Aussie finished on the podium behind Hamilton and Verstappen, and it meant Cyril Abiteboul would have to get a tattoo following a bet between the pair. Lance Stroll missed the race after feeling unwell, with Hülkenberg returning for Racing Point. The Canadian would later confirm a positive coronavirus test. Portimao hosted its first ever Formula 1 race, and it started in frantic fashion, as Carlos Sainz took the lead of the race on soft tyres. However, Hamilton would take his 92nd Formula 1 victory, passing Michael Schumacher's record of race wins. In November, George Russell's agonising wait for a Formula 1 point would go on, as he spun out behind the safety car despite being well placed at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. The big story of the month and the season came 2 weeks later, as Hamilton won the Turkish Grand Prix, sealing a 7th Drivers' Championship, but not before Lance Stroll had qualified on pole, 5 seconds faster than the Mercedes pair. The rain poured for most of the weekend, on an already slippy track, but it was a remarkable weekend for the Brit to seal yet another title. He'd score his final win of the season 2 weeks later at the Bahrain Grand Prix, but as with most things in 2020, drama wasn't far away. First race in Bahrain was overshadowed by a horror crash for Romain Grosjean, which involved his car splitting in half and bursting into flames. Thankfully, Grosjean escaped without any major injuries, but he was forced to miss the last 2 races, being replaced by Pietro Fittipaldi. The final month of the year started with Lewis Hamilton testing positive for coronavirus, just days after winning the Bahrain Grand Prix. He was replaced by George Russell, with Jack Aitken filling the seat at Williams. After qualifying second, he swept past Bottas at the first turn, and looked on course for not only a first ever F1 point, but the win. However, 2020 had other things planned, as a series of pit stop mistakes and a puncture meant the Brit finished 9th. However, it was left for Sergio Perez to claim a first ever F1 win, staking his claim for a seat next season. Hamilton returned at the season finale in Abu Dhabi, but Max Verstappen took his second win of the season, as he dominated from start to finish. December wasn't done just there, as we saw the final seats confirmed for next year. Perez got his drive with Red Bull, replacing Alex Albon, whilst Mick Schumacher and Nikita Mazepin signed for Haas, whilst Yuki Tsunoda joined AlphaTauri, making the step up after just 1 year in Formula 2. 2020 has been a truly memorable year, despite it looking like we might not have a season at all. Thank you for joining us on this crazy season. We hope you've had a great Christmas and have a happy new year. We can't wait for 2021.